We're currently in the midst of this automotive revolution, with changes to ergonomics, performance, efficiency, and even safety means that it sounds like these cars are all wonderful these days. But you'd be wrong. Trends like electrification, changes of engines and drivetrain designs, and even bad transmissions like you'll find with the CVT in products like the Rogue and Nissan. I want to share this worrying trend as it adds cost, complication, and may even shorten the life of your vehicle. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first trend is like we have right over here, larger and larger vehicles. Here we have a big Lexus. We also know Infiniti makes a new QX80, that's absolutely huge, and Cadillac Escalade's another very large machine. And if you look at the trend around the entire industry, every manufacturer, even Ford, GM, Stellantis with the Wagoneer, almost every brand is building bigger, larger SUVs. SUVs are popular. We all love to sit behind a big, powerful vehicle that feels comfortable and luxurious and safe. But there's more and more of those vehicles on the road, and less small vehicles like this little Hyundai Venue that we have parked right here. Including other statistics we see now, Mitsubishi is canceling the Mirage because it's one of their smallest, very tiny little cars, and it's not selling very well. The fact is, even vehicles like this little RAV4 from a couple generations ago is substantially smaller than the new version that replaces these vehicles. And if you look down this entire aisle, almost every vehicle is an SUV. There's the odd car, but for the most part, SUVs are very popular. Now that's wonderful, and I personally love driving around in a truck, but it's a worrying trend because the more space we consume on the road, the less space there is between vehicles. A lot of those full-size vehicles don't handle as well, they don't brake as well, emergency avoidance is not clearly as well. Emissions, well, that's another factor, but ultimately the big thing is just they take space and they don't handle as well. A lot of regards, a lot of people assume that they're safer. In many cases, they simply aren't. Sure, while they might be larger, there might be more space between you and the vehicle in front. The reality is you can't stop on time, and driving a smaller car or even a sportier SUV sometimes helps you avoid those accidents in the first place, making them ultimately more preventative. When you come from industry, there's two ways to look at safety. One is preventative, and the other one is more or less reactive. Third line of defense would be sort of the safety processes, the size, the bulk. That would be your third line of defense. That would be if something happened, how bad would it be? How much can we eliminate that? But the first line of defense ultimately is, how can you prevent it in the first place? Blind spot detection, some of the sensors and technology help, and you find that in almost every brand. You don't find that necessarily exclusive to SUVs. So it's preventing the accident in the first place, having better accident avoidance, dodging, weaving, having stronger brakes, better line of sight, looking out the rear view mirrors. Of course, just having that ability to avoid the accident in the first place is ultimately the best way out of that and makes them actually arguably a safer vehicle. So it's just the sheer size of a lot of these cars and SUVs and trucks on the road these days is a little bit of a worrying trend. Here's another very worrying trend by a lot of people these days. A lot of people are starting to think, why are we going with smaller turbocharged engines? The previous generations were V6s, V8s, naturally aspirated. And here's an example. Here we have an older generation Tacoma, and this has the V6 four-wheel drive. This is arguably one of the most reliable Toyotas that they have ever made. Now SR5, that's kind of a basic truck. You get crew cab here, and in many cases you can also get a manual gearbox. This is a very reliable vehicle, and some of Toyota's best reputation for reliability was wrapped in vehicles like this, like the Tacoma or the older outgoing 4Runner or the outgoing Tundra. They were all naturally aspirated V6s or V8 engines. But unfortunately, that's all changing, because now this shift in transition, even Toyota is changing. Instead of having a lot of their naturally aspirated vehicles, they're now putting smaller engines with turbos. And that's not exclusive to just Toyota. Honda also struggled with transitioning from some of their naturally aspirated 2.4 liter four-cylinder that were ultra reliable, 2 liter ultra reliable, even the 1.8s were ultra reliable, and then they go and switch it up and they put this 1.5 liter turbo 4, oil and fuel dilution issues, which largely are solved now, but it took many years to sort that out. And even Mercedes-Benz, another classic example. Here we have a C-Class, a very beautiful car. As you can see, all the great trim, you have the great wheels on here. This one is a C300, but the outgoing C300 actually had a V6 engine. This newer one was replaced with a turbo 2 liter 4-cylinder engine under the hood, And unfortunately, once they did that, they collaborated, of course, with a French company, put together this new engine, which works, it's economical, but it's not as reliable. It's a little fragile. There's been cases already with hold pistons because of detonation and bad fueling. As a lot of these manufacturers like Mercedes is finding out, reliability is not quite the same with this transition from larger NA engines down to smaller turbocharged engines. Lexus is also having some troubles, of course, with that new 3.4 liter twin turbo V6 that they swapped out and replaced from a previous generational engine that was ultra reliable, a 4.6, 4.7 liter V8 or the 5.7 liter V8 found in the older outgoing Tundra. Now they've replaced it with this new problematic V6 that seems to be throwing all kinds of bearings. Lots of issues. Ford EcoBoost and their 3-cylinder engines you find in the EcoSports, as well as GM also in their Blazers. A lot of these vehicles now are going small turbocharged, highly strung, direct injected vehicles, and then they'll stick them up with a CVT transmission, which is also problematic. So a lot of these technology that's moving vehicles forward seems to be doing it for a couple of main reasons. Well, number one is allegedly they're saying it has to do with CAFE standards, which ultimately is reducing the amount of fuel consumption over a period of time. And the other one is essentially strict emissions, trying to reduce the amount of emissions to the air. Now, while that may be wonderful and great, if that turbo 3-cylinder engine just doesn't last as long as the outgoing, naturally aspirated 4, are you changing vehicles more often? Are you recycling vehicles? Are you scrapping more vehicles? And then therefore more in the landfill? That's always the conversation. This new technology, a lot of these new engines are not built to last. Now there's some great drivetrains out there yet. Toyota, Lexus still holding on to what's left of that 3.5 liter V6. And there's some good engines out there. Even Acura and Honda still have a 3.5 liter V6, albeit it doesn't have the same level of durability that the Toyotas does. It's still naturally aspirated and it is quite reliable, other than the fuel management system. But largely what we're starting to see, this growing and worrying trend to move into vehicles with smaller, highly strung turbocharged direct injected engines, variable valve timing, and they all cost money to maintain. And while they are relatively reliable, at least for the first 5 or 6 years, with time they will likely, most of them will not last the kind of years that you could get out of some of the older naturally aspirated variants of even the same manufacturer. Another trend that's extremely annoying, and I gotta admit it's probably gonna come and go with time, is the boring colors. Now, okay, great, okay, gray, boring, blue, okay, yeah, that one's kind of stands out, but black, gray, black, black. Okay, there's a red one over here. This one's just a little bit different, but that's okay for an exception. But just take a look around here. And we got to admit, I mean, Tesla almost started the trend with white cars, white, white, white. And then they, of course, they offered a little bit of red. But other than that, it's just white, white, white. And that's their standard color. So it's a no-cost option. So people all buy them. Where's the uniqueness? Where is the excitement? Nobody's making cool cars anymore that look flashy, look fun. I get it. Not everybody wants to stand out like a sore thumb. But you know what? Not everybody's driving just a basic ho-hum Corolla. I get it. There's certain cars that are just going to naturally come that way. They're going to be very vanilla yogurt, and that's going to be a constant. That's pretty typical. But when you're stepping up to luxury cars, performance cars, Porsche, and they're seal gray, I mean, where do you go with some of these vehicle colors? And where do people, I mean, look, gray, black, white. I mean, here, there's a whole lineup of black Mercedes SUVs. Okay, there's a couple of white ones in here, but it's a sea of black and gray. How uninspiring can things get? And unfortunately, I hate to go there because sometimes black shines well in the sun and everybody wants a black car. It looks wonderful. But just when you look at the sea of all of these different cars, there's very few unique colors. Where's the bright reds? Where's the shiny blue and the glossy colors? Now, I get it. There's a bit of a understatement going on with a lot of these car brands. I mean, this is a nice, like the Nardo gray you're finding originally in Audi, Lamborghini. That's an interesting color. This here is great. And we know that a lot of these, this G-Wagon is a matte blue. And so a lot of companies now are providing that. They're hard to clean, hard to maintain, but it's a good looking vehicle. But again, we got grays, we got blacks, whites, grays, and the list goes on and on. The only way to get into something really flashy and fun is really go buy a Lambo, Ferrari, McLaren. That's where the fun colors seem to pop out. But a lot of these car manufacturers are reducing the options to get really flashy, fun colors. Let's be honest, if you're driving a Mercedes-Benz, you kind of want to be seen, no? I mean, it seems to me like a lot of people that drive the luxury cars do it for two main reasons. One, of course, it's because They want to be comfortable. They want to have all the latest technology, performance. They like all of the things associated with that. But the second main reason is it tells themselves, and let's admit it, often tells other people that you've made it. You've accomplished something financially, a goal, an objective, and now you've come up with the resources to buy your dream car, whether it's a small little Benz or a full-size S-Class. A lot of these vehicles do and should stand out. I mean, if you buy a Porsche 911, why would you buy a gray, a seal gray? Get a car that's a yellow or red. I mean, you see it sometimes in the GT3 cars, but you really just don't see it enough in the mainstream. And the sea of white, grays, and blacks are boring. I mean, just like Tesla, I wish I'd start to see more and more interesting colors in the industry, but for now it feels like everything's sort of understated, low-key, and a consistent 1, 2, 3, white, gray, and black. If you're liking the video so far, you're gonna love the rest of the channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget the notifications bell so you know when the next amazing videos come. And here's another trend that I think is ridiculous going on these days, is the lack of exhaust pipes. Now, this great little Mazda CX-5, you'll notice it does have a set of real exhaust tips down here. They're chrome, you got a little carbon around them, but they're absolutely real. And that's unfortunately going away, because look over here, this Toyota doesn't have it, that Toyota doesn't have it. These Lexus vehicles all have these little plastic surrounds like that. There's not even an exhaust tip on that. Over here as well, they finish it off nicely, but where's the exhaust tips on this vehicle? You lose some of that personality on this vehicle. Rather, even on a Mercedes-Benz like this GLE 450, we look right here, and this is hilarious because in this GLE, you look down here and they give you these beautiful surrounds, but there's nothing there. It's plastic inserts, nothing. You actually got to look underneath here to see the exhaust system where it just spouts out down below, and it doesn't even pop out at the back of the vehicle. So to me, all this plastic, fantastic, fake surrounds absolutely looks ridiculous. Now, that being said, there's a lot of car makers that give you the fake looking surrounds, but they actually still have the exhaust tip in there. So this one is somewhat forgivable. I don't mind it. It's a nice way to sort of clean up the exterior of the look of the vehicle, and it still emits right there. There's an actual exhaust tip there. But I saw the other day a little Mercedes-Benz that had the tips, and I saw exhaust as it was warming up shooting out from right below the wheel there, and so it looked absolutely ridiculous. Now, it's not the end of the world, and really there's worse things to worry about from a reliability standpoint, but it's just a trend that I think is ridiculous. And here we have a Mercedes-Benz, another classic example of another worrying trend that we're starting to see in the automotive space. Now, if you go over to 6-Speed Car Reviews, that's my other car review channel. You're going to want to give that a look. I'll give that a link at the end of this video, but you definitely want to check it out. I've actually featured numerous Mercedes-Benz, and the latest being some of these vehicles. I've test driven some of the GLEs and GLCs, GLAs, you name it, all kinds, including some of their EQEs, and you name it, all sorts of different models. One of the worrying trends isn't just the technology, because the technology overload is what a lot of these vehicles are seeing now, and a lot of Mercedes-Benz are known for that. You know, they'll put all kinds of these adaptive headlights. That's technology. When that headlight system fails, you're talking about a $6,000 or $7,000 headlight. Of course, all kinds of other technology like self-leveling systems with some of these vehicles, and there's more and more vehicles that have that type of technology. Large panoramic sunroofs, although they're wonderful, they're great, I love the way they look when you're using them, the fact is we rarely use them. So you have this big sheet of glass, and there's been lots of problems and complaints by customers where sunroofs blow out. Yes, the glass shatters and all comes raining down on the customer inside. Of course, here you got 4MATIC all-wheel drive, so again, more layers of complexity. And then if you look from wall to wall, you have this massive display screen on the front there. So there's way too much technology, sensors going on these vehicles, and they're clearly not built to last forever. A lot of that technology, sensors, it's very expensive. Those big screens can cost you thousands of dollars to replace. But there's this transition to more big screens, less analog gauges, less buttons and knobs. And we're seeing a lot more of that. So transition to the next problem and the next worrying trend are haptic and capacitive controls. Now what we're looking at here again is a GLE. And as we cycle around, I just want to make a comment. You do have other tech like this. These can fail. This, of course, you got this touch access in here. All of these perimeter and proximity sensors can fail. But when you look at a lot of these modern day luxury vehicles, and also a lot of the mainstream now, on the dash, you'll find now they've replaced, with the previous generation, they actually had push buttons. On the steering wheel, for example, you had all kinds of controls to navigate through your menus. This one here, unfortunately, now we're dealing with more haptic controls. Now you're getting to more of these other controllers. It's no longer a button that can fail that's designed for 10,000 operations or 100,000 operations. Now you've got these haptic controls that are a lot like the back of your range. Have you ever owned one of those ranges or those stoves in your kitchen and found that the backboard just doesn't last like the old ones did from back in the 70s and 80s? That's right, a lot of them are smooth, glossy black. They look wonderful and you keep pressing them, but after a while they stop working. A lot of these controls, like that type of control, or even haptic or capacitive, where sometimes it doesn't respond. I mean, we've seen phones that don't react all that well. Unfortunately, more and more car brands are going to that. And a review I did on the GLA Mercedes displayed that a lot of capacitive and haptic controls in a modern day Benz. We're seeing more and more of that in every manufacturer. And with that comes not only reliability concerns, scratch and dent, but the big thing is, of course, when things fail, and they do, those parts are never as cheap as the older outgoing buttons and knobs. So a lot of these vehicles now are built with a very strict time frame in mind. Planned obsolescence in a lot of people's opinions. The way they're designed, they're designed to run beautifully for 5 years. Remember, a lot of these vehicles have warranties, 2-3 years. They might even extend you out with a CPO up to about 5 or 6 years. But after that, it's all over. And these vehicles are not built to last 350, 400,000 miles like a lot of these older Toyota and Lexus products. They were just built with a simple task in mind: reliability and pride of construction. And sadly, a lot of that has gone away by the dodo bird. So yes, haptic, capacitive controls, electronics inside, all the sensors, the big screens, all just a big recipe for disaster. And while some of it's nice and flashy, it could make a great auxiliary screen. And I love having some of those graphics in the center, but it should never really be your entire pod display. It shouldn't be major controls that you use every day. Those should all still be a conventional, easy to grasp, easy to use button or knob. The next trend I find absolutely horrific is the styling, and more specifically the styling on a lot of these modern vehicles because they're EVs. Now, it's not the EV factor, but what it is they go and put all of this new look and design theme around a vehicle because it is an electric vehicle. Like, it's going to make drastic differences on efficiency, coefficients of drag. But here you have an example of one of the worst looking vehicles in my own personal opinion. Some love it, some don't. I mean, it certainly looks extremely high quality and this high gloss, but can you imagine after 100,000 kilometers and rock chips and all that getting pelted with the hard conditions, how that's going to look? I mean, all of that high gloss element, it looks wonderful when it's new, but it's still sort of odd looking. It has an odd duct to it. And it doesn't matter if it's Benz, if it's Kia, Hyundai, it doesn't matter. Every EV pretty much is creating a vehicle that just looks awkward because it's an EV. And now maybe that's the distinguishing look, maybe that's sort of the theme that they're going for, but nonetheless, it certainly is an awkward look. Now, on top of it, the styling that they're doing in a lot of grills, and I get it, you don't need a radiator, you don't need the vents there to make the radiator breathe to help to cool the engine. I get it, but even putting a standard radiator in there just for looks and cosmetics, I mean, you're putting in this blank plate, you might as well just put a radiator in there. Right here in these wheels, I mean, I haven't seen an uglier set of wheels since, oh, I don't know, the Gremlin or the Pacer. And then of course you have all these other details. Now, some of them is nice, but then they go and do other things like flush handles. I mean, even that technology is likely going to fail at some point. But just the overall look is one that's more sleek, and some love it, some don't. But I'm not sure I love the lines of this, and I think it's the styling that a lot of these EVs, doesn't matter if it's Kia, EV6, 9, you name it, they're all a little bit quirky and awkward to me. And right here, look, okay, you get the LED taillights, I don't mind that, but just the overall finish of the back end is very soft, and not a really good look to me. Again, all kinds of other themes here. Yeah, you get the big glass and all of the other amenities, and I did a review on one of these EQEs. You're going to want to check it out at the end of the video. Again, I'll link that in to that video as well. You're going to want to see some of these reviews because they're great. You're going to understand more about these vehicles. But nonetheless, I think a lot of these EV styling is just for the birds, and it seems like it's a trend that's getting worse, and even more exaggerated as time goes on. Another trend is the CVT transmission you're finding in a lot of smaller cars these days. You know, Nissan's been carrying the Jatco, and even though they've done some mild upgrades to it, the Jatco transmission has been a major source of a lot of their issues, concerns, and durability challenges. And naturally, that's starting to really become a problem for Nissan because Nissan is struggling with sales these days. And a lot of that really comes comes down to the fact that they've had so many problems, recalls, lawsuits regarding the CVT, which is their continuously variable transmission. And unfortunately, many brands are starting to go that route. Honda's doing CVTs of their own, and as well, many car brands are starting to go with dual clutch, double clutch transmissions, which have been slightly problematic as well. They're highly technical, and while they are durable in a lot of regards and they do perform well, the worst part is they're extraordinarily expensive when they fail. So that's the problem. You're dealing with CVTs that fail and they cost $6,000 to $8,000 to replace. You can even get into a dual clutch gearbox that fails, and when it does, now you're talking $15,000 to $20,000 if you're into some of the Euro brands. It's unfortunate, but these very technical transmissions that we're finding in a lot of modern day vehicles are very expensive. You know, there's less and less manual gearboxes. Those were simple. The worst thing that would happen when you burn out a clutch, it might cost you $1,500 to get a new clutch job, and you'd be on your merry way. And they usually lasted a long time. Of course, torque converter automatic transmissions are quite reliable. And you know what? A lot of people are starting to miss a lot of this older torque converter autos because there's less and less, and they're being replaced with CVTs or dual clutch gearboxes. You know, the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission found in many vehicles, BMW carries a lot of those ZF autos. They are bulletproof. They know when to shift, how to shift. They predict the driver's intentions, and even more importantly, they're reliable. So while there's still some of those reliable transmissions around, like the ZF 8-speed is one that comes to mind as one of the best, unfortunately there's less and less cars that carry a standard garden variety torque converter auto. Now, there have been some really bad problematic torque converter autos in the past too, absolutely, but as we learn and get better with technology, we just start to perfect it, and then it's time to change. And now we're seeing more brands try other things, many of which they're going through teething problems. And since engines are so important and they're the lifeline of every vehicle that we see here today, here, you're going to want to check out a video that I posted all about why some of these modern day engines are failing catastrophically. I really do hope to see each and every one of you on the next one, and I really do appreciate all the support. Hope to see each and every one. Have an absolute wonderful day. See you then. Bye-bye.